Today we're revisiting the experiment that we first developed, and we're going to improve it by making some changes. First of all, we're going to make the study and the test phase appear on black backgrounds, as you can see here, rather than just the default gray background. We're also going to look at how to upgrade the test response from a simple yes-no to a 1 to 6 confidence response with a recollection or familiarity response, we're calling it re-experience here, for each item. And we're also going to look at how to randomize which items are even old or new for any particular subject. So all of these to come in this video, guys. Let's get to it. Welcome back to another PsychoPy tutorial video in this series. Today we're going to be taking our basic experiment, which we created way back when, and we're going to be modifying it and upgrading it in order to accept some more advanced forms of recognition decisions. So first things first, I'm going to save this as a different file name. We're going to call this Demo2. I know I told you guys come up with better naming conventions. Do not name your file Demo2. Come up with a more descriptive name. Call it Advanced Recognition Demo File or something like that. But okay, so to remind you, in this study, participants study 6 words. The words go around in a loop. The words are drawn from a stimulus file that we've got. We select only the first 6 items from that list. So showing you the list here, we actually have 12 items in total, and we're only selecting the first 6, and we do that by using 0:6. We are randomly selecting these items, so these first 6 items will appear in a random order for each subject. Words appear in either green or blue, and then in the test phase, what you find is that all 12 words are going to be shown to subjects. Subjects have to make a decision each time they see a word about whether it is old or new, and they do that by pressing Y or N, and we can see that in here. Now in the stimulus file, by the way, I added a new column called long short, where I just sort of eyeballed it to see if the words were long or short. I just wanted to show you guys. In one of the previous videos, we talked about how we never added an old new column, and we had to use an Excel function to calculate that manually. But if we had just included this from the beginning, then later on in our pivot table, we easily could have sorted old and new items. I'm just showing you could have other variables. So maybe you could have whether these words are long or short. You could have whether they're a noun or a verb. You could have all sorts of things. So make sure that when you are designing your stimulus file, you're thinking about all the ways you might want to categorize your output later on. Maybe you want to look at whether people are responding differently to long or short words, and you're including variables that track that information in your materials, in your stimulus file. Otherwise, again, it is a pain to add it after the fact. It can almost always be done, but it can be tiresome, especially if it's something very complicated that you're trying to track. So we basically want to upgrade this experiment and get away from using just the yes-no responses and get into a more complicated type of response. So what we really want to do is expand this test trial out and add more to it. So here's what we're going to do. First things first, if you recall the experiment, it was a gray background with text appearing on the gray. Let's go ahead and do something a little nicer than just a gray background. We're actually going to go ahead and we're going to insert a polygon. So a polygon is basically a rectangle, and we're going to fill it with a specific color. So number of vertices, 4, means it's a rectangle. We could have 3 if we want a triangle, or 2 for a line. 4 is plenty for us. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fill it with the color black, and the polygon is going to be drawn with a border. I'm actually going to leave this as is right now. This is actually the code for white. You'll see it will be a black square but with a white outline. We'll change this to black after. I just want you guys to see it. And I'm going to leave this as is for just a moment. You'll see the polygon is at the bottom of the list here. It lasts for 1 second. So what happens when we actually run our experiment and just see what we've done by adding this new polygon in? So I'll skip over the study phase here. So you'll see the box appears, and it only appears for 1 second. And you'll notice that it is a black box with a white border. We want this to be a totally black box. We actually want this to be the background. From now on, we want to have a totally black background, and you'll see why in just a moment. So exiting from our experiment, let's go ahead and fix this. First of all, under Advanced, we want to change the line color to be black. So it's a black box with a black line outline, so it has no outline essentially. Next, we want to change its duration to be infinite, just like the text object, so it appears forever. And if we left it like that, it would cover up our word forever. So we actually need to move this to the top. The way PsychoPy works is the very first thing here is the first thing it draws. So first it's going to draw this polygon. Then it's going to draw the word. And then here it's going to wait for the keyboard response. It doesn't get drawn on the screen. But basically make sure you're ordering things correctly, because if we just created a big black square to fill up the entire screen and we left it at the very bottom, we would not see anything, because first it would draw the word, then it would draw the polygon, it would cover things up. So put your backgrounds at the top. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to change the size of this thing, and I believe that this should set it to be the entire width and height of the screen. 2, 2. So let's give that a whirl, see what we get. Again, I will skip the study phase here. All right. And there we go. Our words are on a black background, and it looks very nice. I think it looks nicer than that gray background. But we have a problem because the blank is still gray. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll go into our blank here, and let's add a polygon. It's going to last for half a second. It is going to be size 2 and 2. That's the entire width of the screen and the entire height. We're going to change its color to black and black. And it doesn't matter because there's no text being drawn here. But, for good practice, we'll just move the polygon to the back. Notice, by the way, we're not naming our polygons. Let's go ahead and name this. We'll call this poly back blank. And let's go over to our other polygon. Let's actually rename this. We'll call this poly back 1. So again, make sure you're naming things, even these trivial things, because having sloppy names, again, it gets confusing when you're looking at the data file. And here's one more little trick. I'm going to be going into the test phase and making a lot of changes. I want the study phase to skip by really fast. So rather than just sitting here every time waiting for the study phase to go by and editing it out, I'm just going to set the study phase to go by super fast. So each word will only appear for 0.2 seconds. And I'll let you guys see what actually happens when we do this. So if you are trying to debug your experiment, you're trying to skip ahead, you can change times of some of the earlier parts to be super fast, so you can skip ahead to the later parts. And as you can see, that works fairly well. Just be sure to set it back before you run a subject. I've made that mistake before. Okay, so here's our test phase. Yeses and nos on a nice black background. Okay, making some progress. One thing you probably noticed, by the way, is during the study phase, we had the problem of the study items were appearing on a gray background, and then the black blank was jarring. So what we're going to do is go and insert another background here. We'll call it back 2. These are all backgrounds. They don't matter too much what we name them. But again, I'm trying to stick to good naming conventions. We're going to make it size 2 and 2, black and black. And then we just need to remember to make it the very first item in the order here. Move to top. Oh, and actually make sure it only lasts for 0.2 seconds or it will slow us down. And now our study phase is going to look just fine aesthetically. So we're making some aesthetic changes here. Now going back to our test phase here, we want to change the responses. Rather than taking a yes or no response, we want to be able to take a confidence response. We basically, rather than saying press yes if you think the item is studied and no if you think it isn't, we want to say press 6 if you're absolutely sure the item was studied. Press 5 if you're pretty sure the item was studied. 4 if you're kind of sure it was studied. 3 if you kind of think it might not be studied. 2 if you're pretty sure that it might not be studied. And 1 if you're absolutely sure it wasn't studied. So we want to take a confidence response on a 6-point scale. We're going to rename them this keyboard object key test conf, because this is going to be confidence. We're going to get another kind of response as well after. Okay, so now if we do nothing else, yes and no won't work anymore, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will. And that's fine. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is a lot for subjects to keep in mind, so it might be helpful if they had a legend that was on the screen. There's 2 ways to do this. One is we could go into the text object right here, and we could simply add more text. So we could try to write in some text, and we could say new, and we could say old, and that would appear on the screen. Now the only problem though is that this text object is actually getting its value from a variable, and you'll notice we're getting an error here. So we could have done this if we weren't using a variable here, but that's not going to work, so we need another way of doing this. So the other way is to simply add another text object. I mean, you can have more than one text object on a given screen. So we'll call this text confidence scale, so we know what it is. It will have an infinite duration, just like the test word, and it's just going to have a scale. I'm going to type it out like this. And we'll have new, and we'll have old. And so that is exactly what's going to appear on the screen. Now, if we leave everything as is and run it, what we'll see is that our scale does appear on the screen. There's a black background, our word is appearing, and so on, but things are not going to be aligned exactly right. So our study phase now looks much nicer, and it skips by very quickly. Now in our test phase, okay, hammer's there, the scale is there, but look, the scale is like right in the way. This is not nice. What we want to do is move that scale down. So this is not going to work. By the way, yes and no longer work, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 do. Okay, so let's get out of this. We got to move this scale. So we use the position variable. So rather than having it at 0, 0, which is centered, if we change the first number, we're going to change its x-coordinate, so we'll change left or right. If we change the y value, we're going to change its y-coordinate, so it will move up or down. So we want it to move down, so let's set this to -1 and see how that looks. We're going to have to tweak this a little, but this is how you try things in experiments. You try putting in values, see what happens, and you kind of change things as you go. So how does this look? Oh, well, there's our scale. It is way too low, so we have to change this. -1 is too far down. So easy to fix. How about we go -0.5, and we say OK, and we run it. Now it should be below the word, but not so low that it's off the screen. And there we go. We now have a nice clear scale, and now the subject doesn't have to remember, is 1 I'm sure it's old, or is 1 I'm sure it's new. It's right there on the screen for the subject. Great. Okay. Now, this was for the confidence scale. And if we looked at our data file here, now this is an incomplete data file. We didn't go through the whole test phase, but you'll see that now rather than yes and no responses, we have numerical responses. And we'll be able to process those in a variety of different ways. We could sort them into 1s and 0s. We could say if this is 4, 5, or 6, then have a 1. If it's 1, 2, or 3, have a 0. So we could treat these like yes-no responses, and we could do the exact same stuff we did before, or we can do more sophisticated things. We'll get to that in another video. I just wanted to show you that things are being output here automatically now that we've updated things. And you'll notice as well, too, that the long-short variable is there, the old-new variable is there. So everything that was in our stimulus file is all being stored, which is great. Now, we want to go a little bit farther, however. We want to collect more than just a single confidence response. We also want to know why somebody made that decision. So when they say, I'm positive that the item is studied, is that because they can recollect the item from the study phase? Or is it because the item just kind of feels familiar to them? Similarly, if somebody says, no, I'm absolutely sure it's new, why did they make that decision? So we basically want to give people another chance to say something about the same test word that they've just rated. So how do we do that? Well, let's start by first renaming this. Rather than being the test trial, we'll call it the test trial conf to make sure we're clear that this is the confidence rating. Now we actually need to add a new routine. We're going to call this test trial RFN because this is where people make their recollection, familiarity, or neither response. And we're going to insert it after the blank. And we're going to go ahead and insert one more blank actually at the end, so that, again, we have nice, clear interstimulus intervals. Okay. Now, if we click on Test Trial RFN, this is totally blank. And what we need to do is basically include copies of all this stuff. So we have to remake this trial. But instead of taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, we're only going to take R, F, or N. And so we'll change our scale. So let's go ahead and do this. So first we need a polygonal background. So insert a polygon, call it back 3, 2, and 2, black, and black. Oh, and make sure it has an infinite duration. Next we need our word, text test word, argfn, infinite duration. Its value is word item. If you remember, that is the variable that we use in our stimulus file. And remember, switch this from constant to set every repeat. Now, every repeat is when the loop itself repeats. So, if telephone is the word that's shown here, then telephone is going to be shown over here. And we could have other instances where we ask different questions about that item. Telephone is going to be constant until the loop repeats, and then this is going to get reset. So don't worry, set every repeat. It's not going to change from confidence to be a new word over here. It's going to be the same word until that entire loop repeats. And we can go ahead and click OK. What else did we have? We had a keyboard response, so we'll call it key test RFN. And the responses that we will accept are R, F, or N. So did you re-experience the item or recollect it? Is it familiar, or is neither true? And now we need a scale. So we'll call it RFN scale. Infinite duration. And here we're going to present our scale slightly differently. So this is just aesthetically a little easier to plot out than the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Plotting it out this way. We often use the label re-experience when we're talking to subjects, when we're talking about recollection, mostly because intuitively re-experience is the word that makes sense to them about what kind of memory we're talking about. If you bring someone into the lab and you mention recollection, they may not know exactly what you mean. So re-experience is a better label in our experience. Let's go ahead and say OK. And let's go ahead and see how this looks. Okay, so wrench, first item. Let's say it's a 3. And now we get a decision about R, F, or N. Street, R, F, or N. So this is looking pretty good. However, we can go a little bit further. So again, it seems trivial, but things like psychological aesthetics matter, guys. Every time I make a response about confidence, the word goes away and it kind of feels like it's done, and then it comes back. And if I wasn't paying attention, I might not remember that this is the same word as the previous word. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but imagine sitting through 200 trials in a recognition memory experiment. You know, you might start to get tired, and you can't blame subjects for zoning out from time to time. So we need to go one step further and make this even more intuitive. And the way we're going to do it is that after somebody makes a confidence decision, we're going to keep Valley on the screen until the recognition, the re-experience familiar decision is made. So let's see how to do that. The way to do that is to get rid of this blank 500 and come up with a different blank. Now we could just leave it like this, and so instantly after making the confidence response, immediately the response for R, F, or N will appear. It's nice to give people a minor break so they can see there's a division between the scales. Here, I'll show you what it looks like right now. So right after making a confidence decision, you instantly make another decision. And in fact, that's okay. If you want to keep that, in fact, I wouldn't blame you. That is actually perfectly acceptable. But we're going to be nitpicky, and in the interest of showing you how to do things, we're going to add one more routine here. We'll call this a new routine. We'll call it the test blank 500. Sounds like an awesome kind of IndyCar, perhaps. So the test blank 500. So what is going to happen here is we'll insert a polygon that will last for half a second. It will be the entire size of the screen, and it will just be a completely black polygon. Oh, remember to label it. What are we up to? Back 4 now, I believe. Okay, so there's our polygon. Now what we're going to do is insert a text object. We'll call it text test blank. It will also last for half a second. It will take on the value of word item, but we're not going to accept any keyboard response here. Remember, set every repeat. Don't leave it as constant. So now what will happen is test blank 500 is a blank space in between the confidence and the re-experience familiar rating, where subjects can't make a response and they just have to look for half a second, but the black background and the test word are maintained on the screen. So what does this look like? Now you make a decision, and you get a second before you have to make that next decision. And it just helps it feel like separate decisions. It gives subjects a second to think so they can't respond too quickly. And that absolute blank between items now feels really like, okay, wrench is now done. Now I'm on the hammer. I'm making my 2 decisions with hammer and so on. So again, these little things, think about how your experiment feels. Try and make it as intuitive as you can. And these are the techniques that you can use to do this. Now I'm going to show you 2 other things real quickly. One is that in addition to being able to have multiple polygons on the screen, multiple text boxes on the screen, you can have multiple polygons. So for instance, maybe you want to go a step further and have the scale appear on a white background on the bottom half of the screen, whereas the text is appearing on the black background on the top half. So maybe what you're going to do is create a new polygon that is 2 units wide, which is the entire width of the screen. It is maybe half a unit tall, which is just a quarter of the screen, but it is half a unit down. So it is sort of centered in the bottom part of the screen. Oh, I should set that to negative because it's down. And we'll leave it as white and white. And we don't want it to be the last thing drawn. We're just going to move it up 1. And we also need to set its duration to infinite. So what we're basically trying to do is say, what if we wanted to have the confidence scale appear on a white background? And we have to go into the confidence scale, by the way, and change its color to black. And if we do this, if we go ahead and click run here, what we will see is now the confidence scale. Now our experiment looks even nicer, to be completely honest. And our confidence scale is very distinct from the stimuli. This is getting into an unnecessary step, but there are times where you want to make these visual distinctions nice and clear to participants, and this is how you do it. You can draw any polygon you want on the screen. We could draw circles, triangles, we could position them anywhere we want, give them different colors, we can do whatever we want, and so it's a very flexible system for adding things. Now, if we were going to carry forward with this white bar, we would need other white bar polygons on the test blank and the test RFN decision, so that when we press the confidence button, it doesn't disappear like that, because that's a little unusual. So you might want to have that white bar be on all 3 of this one and this one, so that it is there constantly. We're not going to get into that. We'll go ahead and just sort of leave things as is. When you are done debugging your test mode, we need to remember to go back into our study trial and set its durations to be back to 2 seconds the way it was. Otherwise, when you run your first subject, they're going to have a really fast study phase and you'll realize that you've kind of messed things up. So don't forget to go back and fix things. There's one last thing that I want to show you guys, and that is, how do you randomize your stimuli for different subjects? I mean, look at this. The entire time we've been dealing with this stimulus file, every single time we run the experiment, friend, telephone, mountain, valley, glass, and wrench are old items. Land, globe, hammer, pet, wire, and street are new items. And more than that, friend, telephone, and mountain are always the green items. And valley, glass, and wrench are always the blue items. Let's say that later on we find that there's a difference between the memory of green items and blue items. And maybe people were told to say green items aloud and blue items silently. You can't conclude that saying words aloud leads to better memory than reading them silently in this case, because maybe it has nothing to do with the saying aloud and reading silently. Maybe it's just that friend, telephone, and mountain are more memorable words than valley, glass, and wrench. So basically, if we don't randomize our stimuli for our different subjects, then we're going to get into a situation where we might actually be studying item effects, and that's a bit of a problem. So how could we fix this? Well, here's the simplest solution. Add a new column on the left over here and title it Rand. And we'll bold it as well so it's clear it's a title. And then use an Excel equation which is called Rand. So type in equals and type Rand and open bracket, close bracket. Copy that cell. You can hold shift and press down until you've selected all your stimuli. Then you can just press paste, Control V, and now you have a random number. So what does this rand function do? So you can go to a cell over here and just press delete or enter or whatever you want. Actually, you have to press delete. Enter doesn't work. But every time something changes in Excel, look, the random numbers are updating. Okay, so what we've done is we've continually given each of these stimuli a random number. So how can we actually use this? Well, if we highlight these two cells, these two columns, and we sort based on the random column, then all of these words are going to randomly reorder themselves. And now different words will be old, different words will be green, different words will be blue, and different words will be new. So let's do that. So we highlight these two cells, we go to Data. Now what you want to do is click on this sort box. And when you're asked what to sort by, make sure you're selecting random. If you accidentally select word item, what will happen is the words will just go in alphabetical order. And you'll know you've made a mistake when you click on these other sort buttons and nothing seems to be changing. So click on the sort box, click on random. Doesn't matter, smallest to largest, largest, smallest, makes no difference because it's random. And look, now the words are randomized. So wire, street, and glass are the green items. Hammer, wrench, and friend are the blue items. Mountain, telephone, globe, land, and pet are the new items. Now there is one thing you have to be careful of. Notice, remember how I sorted words based on whether they were long or short? Well, I didn't select that column when I randomized, and look, this column didn't get changed. So mountain and telephone are now being considered short items, but they were definitely long before. So let me go ahead and fix this, and let's try this one more time. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that that was roughly how I had categorized the items. So if you do have variables that need to stick with certain stimuli, you have to highlight them along with the stimuli before you randomize. These variables we want to stay stable because we want different words to end up as old or new. So it's okay if they don't change. And we click randomize. Now long and short has moved with these items, and we have gotten a new random set here. So what you can do with your stimulus file is before you run a subject, you go in, you randomize, you click save, and now when you run your experiment, actually let's check to see what words to expect. So we should see land, pet, wrench, valley, hammer, street. Can you guys remember that? Land, pet, wrench, valley, hammer, street. Land, pet, wrench, hammer, valley, street. Land, pet, wrench, Hammer Valley Street. Hammer Valley Street sounds like some kind of, could be a street or something. Hammer Valley. So there's valley, there's land, I think pet was in there, so there's street, and so on. And so this is going to be our study set. If we go into our file and we randomize again, so we sort again, now mountain, valley, glass, land, wrench, friend are going to be the old items. Remember to save, and then hit run. And so now we're expecting mountain, valley, friend. I think wrench and land were in there. There's mountain, valley, and friend. I believe should also be green because they were the first few that I saw. Okay, friend's blue, whatever. The point is that you can randomize the stimuli for your different subjects. So this is very useful and powerful. And what you could do in theory is you could have a whole bunch of other words down here. Like I don't even know what I can come up with off the top of my head, etc. And what you could do, so we're going to say these are long items. Sure, they're all long, whatever. Doesn't really make a difference. What you could do is have a big set of words, and maybe you'll only ever use the first 12, but some subjects won't even see certain words. So this big set now is called your word pool. And for each subject, you're only selecting 12 that you're going to use in a particular, in the experiment for them. So when you randomize it, so now these words aren't even going to get used. Now, in order to make sure these words aren't used, by the way, you have to go in to your test list and make sure you're not using the entire set of rows. You're only using up to 12. Because if we have 6 items at study, we only want 12 items at test. If I didn't do that, if I didn't go make that change, then what would happen is the test list would actually include these extra items. So you can use your stimulus file strategically. You can get pretty sophisticated with it in terms of randomizing it, and you really should. In some of the later videos, we'll handle how to have PsychoPy automatically randomize stimuli for you, so you don't have to go do this. But if you did go this route, then before you run a new subject, you would simply open up your stimulus file, select any columns related to your specific stimuli, and leave sort of these columns stable, and you just go to sort and sort by the random column, and you would always get a unique arrangement of words that you could then run your experiment with, and subjects would all have a different set of items. Anyway, that's it for today. So hopefully these advanced techniques have sort of expanded your abilities and what you think you can do with PsychoPy. Again, play around with things, try things. It's how you learn, guys. So don't be afraid to put in numbers, see what changing certain values do. But basically just test things as you go, correct your mistakes, and good luck making more advanced experiments. In the next video, we'll look at how to deal with data that comes out of this experiment, because now we have confidence and RFN data, and that gets treated a little differently from the yes-no data that we saw before. So until then, guys.